The young boy casually tossed out a stone. Yet it shattered the forest's most terrible phantom beast skull instantly. All because he was an archmage living under the guise of a shepherd boy. The story begins in a remote village. A little kid there, clueless, laughed and said, "I'm a wizard here." "You phantom beast, take my magic," the girl opposite cheerfully replied. "I'm the phantom beast, I'll devour your wizard." Then the boy raised the wooden staff in his hand into a fighting stance and struck it hard against the girl's forehead. The girl winced in pain and angrily shouted, "Why did you actually hit me?" But the boy felt no remorse and brazenly insisted, "Phantom beasts are supposed to be defeated by wizards." "Then I want to be a wizard too," the girl demanded. The selfish boy immediately objected. No, she still wanted to compete. There was no way he'd allow it. Just then, Rabbis approached from behind, smiling kindly and greeted, "You kids are unusually energetic this morning, aren't you?" The two children responded politely. The boy, Ngo Enger, asked, "Grandfather Rabbis, how does one become a wizard?" He answered honestly, "It's not something you can just decide, child. A wizard is humanity's pinnacle, residing among the highest social ranks, nobles and knights who wield mysterious powers passed down from ancestors. So unfortunately, you children cannot become wizards." The boy's father, standing behind, seemed helpless and spoke up, "What are you telling the children, elder?" "Is that even true?" Rabbis asked in puzzlement. "What are you referring to?" He plainly explained, "I heard a phantom beast has appeared." Rabbis replied solemnly, "It's true." That revelation unsettled him. "What?" Robert quickly elaborated. "Last night Robert said he saw it at the village gate, its whole body covered in pitch-black shadow. They say it was a leopard the size of a house. But don't worry, the village chief went to the city to summon a wizard. He'll surely be invited and the phantom beast will be destroyed." The villagers sighed in relief. "That's a relief." Then they warned the village children, "Listen, you lot, don't go into the forest for now." Rabbis picked up a branch and warned, "Be careful too. If you're not a wizard, you can hardly kill a phantom beast." The boy's father anxiously asked, "Does everyone in the village know?" He calmly affirmed, "Of course." He asked further, "What about him?" Rabbis looked confused. "Who do you mean?" He then mentioned, "That fellow on Hisserin Hill. On the hill, the sheep were lying and resting. That shepherd Tyran lay on the ground, tilting his head to look at the sky. Surrounded by the sheep, he thought to himself, this is so boring. The scenery is exactly the same, day in, day out." He closed his eyes and grumbled in annoyance, "At this rate, I'll forget how to talk." Suddenly at that moment, Tyran heard someone scold, "Useless brat." Rabbis leaned on his staff beside him and reproached, "The sun hasn't even set, and at your age you're already lazily shirking work." Tyran snapped back angrily, "You're blocking out the sun, move aside." This made the old man furious. "You insolent brat." He asked helplessly, "You still hold a grudge about the past?" Tyran acted nonchalant and replied, "What past?" "The matter after your mother died. Were you planning to secretly turn the flock into communal property?" His accusation made Rabbis flush and clear his throat. Tyran shot upright and affirmed, "Yes, if that's what you're talking about, it's true. I'm petty. I'm not generous enough to share my mother's inheritance. We're not that close to be asking after each other's health. If you have business here, say it quickly and be gone." Rabbis shouted angrily, "You rascal." Tyran's expression darkened as he demanded, "What?" Rabbis restrained his feelings and warned, "A phantom beast has appeared." Tyran asked calmly, "A phantom beast?" Rabbis gently stroked a sheep's head and reported, "They say it's a leopard the size of a house. Robert discovered it and is going to warn the villagers." Tyran remarked indifferently, "That's serious, huh?" He asked worriedly, "Aren't you afraid? Around here you're the most likely target, you know." I don't know what your guts are made of. In any case, the village chief has gone to summon a wizard, so be careful. I came here personally because I'm worried about you. Suddenly, Chiran cut in. Adults are never honest at all. Why not just say you're worried about the flock, not me? Hit in the heart, the old man shouted angrily, "You insolent child!" Chiran smirked and ordered, "Hey, old man, say what you came to say and get lost. Your mouth stinks so much it's making my nose almost go deaf." So Rabbis had no choice but to leave, nursing his anger. Chiran's gaze froze. Phantom beast is the term for animals possessing mysterious magical power. If humans have wizards, beasts have phantom beasts. Because of a phantom beast, would a wizard really come to this rural village? Finally, I'll get to see a wizard in person. But the wizard the village chief summons is probably not top tier. He smiled excitedly and said, "Anyway, I want to see it once." Chiran wondered to himself, how strong could it be? Then suddenly he smelled something. Chiran's eyes went blank. The scent of blood. Dusk slowly fell. Chiran walked slowly. Somewhat dazed, it clearly came from this direction. Suddenly he realized something. His steps faltered. His gaze turned expressionless toward one side. Chiran saw Rabbis's body on the ground and casually called, "Rabbis. Told me to be careful, and you went to sell salt first." He was astonished inwardly. He hadn't expected the smell of blood to be coming from old Rabbis. Then Chiran guessed, this wound wasn't caused by a normal wild animal. It must surely be the work of a phantom beast. Suddenly at that moment, Chiran looked up in horror. He saw a towering monster stride toward him. The beast-like creature stepped forward, staring at Chiran. Down in the village, the little boy asked curiously, "Are phantom beasts very strong, father? Adults really can't beat them." The man quickly replied, "Very strong indeed. Even an ordinary adult like your father would be reduced to bones if he charged in." The boy asked in confusion, "So even Dad can't win? What will our village do then?" The man replied softly to reassure him, "Don't worry. The village chief has gone to summon a wizard. The wizard will destroy the phantom beast for us." The boy worriedly asked, "The wizard won't lose, right? The wizard will teach the phantom beast a lesson, won't he?" He nodded confidently. "Of course, they are great figures born with magical power, who can kill a phantom beast with a single word." Chiran glanced at the nearby monster, and his lips barely moved. "Die." The beast was blasted far away. However, it didn't die. It merely bared its teeth and growled. A strong aura radiated from Chiran. He casually wondered, that didn't work. While Chiran was still stunned, the beast charged again. He shouted loudly, "Stop." The beast backed away to a distance. Chiran smiled slightly and muttered, "I knew it wouldn't die instantly, but I didn't expect it to even be stoppable." The beast savagely smashed a nearby boulder, gnashing its teeth and glaring angrily at Chiran. He didn't stand still any longer and bent down slightly, exhaled and steeled himself. Chiran grabbed a stone in his hand and pulled out his shepherd's rope, shouting, "A shepherd must act like a shepherd." At the same time, the beast lunged forward. Chiran commanded the stone to harden, then used the rope to whip the stone, sending it flying. Chiran's eyes reflected the image of that stone. He swung the rope hard and commanded it to speed up. He lifted his foot slightly to gain momentum. A flash of killing intent leapt. He shouted, "Pierce." A powerful beam of force shot forward, aiming straight at the beast. The beam hit it directly and felled it. Fresh blood sprayed everywhere. Chiran's beam of force still powerfully pierced the air. The beast fell face down, mouth agape, screaming in disbelief. Chiran stepped closer and thought to himself, the target was from above. The stone was still floating in midair. Just as he shouted, "Head," It fell and struck the beast's head. The heavy stone hit, causing a loud explosion. Tyran stood in silence, staring at the smoke before him, and calmly watched the beast be destroyed, thinking, first time using this on a phantom beast. He quietly asked himself, should I toss the carcass down into some valley? Then he clicked his tongue in annoyance, doing good deeds again without getting any credit from the villagers. Tyran sighed wearily. It's all because of those villagers. His eyes reflected the image of the monster. I was born a wizard. I realized this special talent as early as 8 years ago. Back then, Tyran could manipulate objects. On the day I just reached 10 years old, I sat on the ground and made everything float. Tyran excitedly called to his mother, "Look, the logs are floating in the air." But his mother said nothing, so Tyran called again, "Mom." He kept bragging to her, "I can make fire and even command the wind." The memory of that day remained vivid in my mind, never fading. His mother angrily shouted, "Stop that this instant." It was the first and only time she ever flew into such a rage at me. Tyran stared in bewilderment. Then she gently took the floating log and softly called, "Tyran." She sat down beside him and suggested, "Come here. Sit down and talk with your mother for a bit, dear." She asked tenderly, "You still want to stay close to me for a long time, don't you?" Tyran sadly nodded and affirmed, "Yes, ma'am." Hearing that, his mother admonished, "Then promise me this. Swear that from now on you will never use this power again." She reminded him in anguish, "And never reveal this power to anyone." Tyran couldn't understand and looked up to ask, "But why, mother?" She replied calmly, "Do you still remember the stories about the nobility and the knights?" He answered naively, "I remember." Then Tyran began to explain to his mother, "Those who wield this power are all called wizards, whether noble or knight. But nobles and knights are fundamentally different. Nobles descend from the Freyan divine line, gods who descended to save humanity in ancient times. Knights are actually descendants of those nobles, but their blood was mixed with mortals." She listened and praised, "Exactly, you remember it well." Then his mother began to lecture, "That's why people distinguish between nobles and knights even though both are wizards. I'll explain why you must never use this power." Tyran. She revealed a shocking truth to him. "Because you inherited that power from your father, a knight. Behind the ramparts of this village lie many treacherous nobles. Those nobles always look down on knights as nothing more than their slaves." She looked straight into her son's innocent face and warned, "So you must carve this into your heart. Absolutely no one must know you are a wizard." Tyran's mother gently asked, "Can you promise me that?" Up to now, 8 long years have passed since that day. I have kept the oath I made to my mother. That promise will never be broken. I have no intention of exposing my identity as a wizard, nor any desire to leave this mountain for the world below. Tyran's eyes slowly opened. Suddenly there was a banging at the door from outside. "Tyran, get your face out here now." He slowly moved to open the door. A crowd of scowling people stared at Tyran. After hearing them out, Tyran yawned tiredly. "So you mean," he asked calmly, "that I am the one who killed Rabbis?" They immediately grabbed his collar and declared, "Exactly, you shameless, despicable wretch." The man angrily accused Tyran. "You struck old Rabbis down and then threw his body out as food for the monsters, didn't you?" After hearing the accusation, he fell silent and said nothing. After a moment of silence, Tyran spoke, "Now I understand why you deliberately blamed me." They froze at that. "What?" Tyran answered without restraint. "The most prominent man in the village had to die alone. Instead of you strong men, cowards who won't face the monsters, I see clearly why you consider this the best way out for yourselves." He smiled and said, "It's such an easy way for you to shirk responsibility and push it all onto me." Hearing that, the man flew into a rage and swung a fist at him. Tyran simply leaned back gently and dodged the blow. In Tyran's mind he thought, magic is indeed incredibly convenient. As long as I desire something intensely enough, it instantly becomes reality. The price is merely mana. Tyran whispered softly, fall down. So the person opposite always ends up sprawling face first. I don't even have to light a fire. Just a small nudge like this is enough. To make everything look natural, not too obvious. Just enough so they don't lose their lives. I'll use pressure to subdue them. As he thought, Tyran executed professional punching moves. A series of wooden staffs flew up into the air. And so for 8 long years. I successfully hid the fact that I am a wizard. After finishing up, Tyran lightly brushed his hands off, sighed indifferently, and reminded them, you should have used some of that energy to arrange a funeral for old Rabbis instead. Then he turned to the women and asked, did you come here to cause trouble too? The girl hurriedly denied it. No, we came here to find you, Tyran. He fell silent, then suggested, take this whole bunch of idiots down the mountain. Then Tyran went inside and took off his coat. Tyran thought to himself, the street below will certainly be chaotic again. They'll use this as an excuse to extort me whenever I go down there to trade. Fine, I can teach them another lesson until they pay a fair price. Thinking that, Tyran breathed a sigh of relief. I've taught them a lesson they'll remember. They won't dare come back. Suddenly he heard pounding at the door again and irritatedly said, are these people crazy? They continued banging on the door from outside. Tyran stepped out and shouted angrily, who is it? Do you really want to be? But when he saw the tall man standing there, he froze. Tyran asked softly, who are you? The man replied awkwardly, my apologies. I thought I might ask a small favor for this journey, but it seems I've come at a bad time. Tyran looked up at him and appraised, a group of travelers. Then he said, no, it's fine, my apologies. It's just that a few uninvited people dropped by and caused some trouble. Tyran wondered to himself, Mother taught me etiquette rules, but is this polite enough? I've never had a civil conversation with anyone in that remote town, so it feels really strange. Still, a group of armed travelers showed up in this dull little town. Then Tyran began, if you intend to find a place to rest. He let out a sigh, then offered, please come inside. A table laden with food was set out. Tyran honestly said, we're not well off, so I'm afraid there's no gourmet fare to offer guests. Charon ate and replied, but this already feels like a feast. Anyway, you've surprised me a bit. Have you never met any strangers from far away? Tyran calmly affirmed. That's right. I was born and raised on this hill. I've lived a shepherd's life all along, and it's rare for this tiny town to get visitors. While drinking, his gaze suddenly froze. Tyran also lifted his cup and drank it dry. Suddenly Charon exclaimed, how interesting. He turned puzzled and asked, huh? He bowed his head and replied slowly, for someone raised here as a shepherd, you are very knowledgeable about polite behavior. Your parents must have raised you strictly, yes? Tyran answered honestly, I learned those things from my mother, but she passed away a few years ago after a serious illness. Charon cheerfully exclaimed, she raised a son to be proud of. I'm sure she's now resting with the gods in the heavenly halls. I want to thank you sincerely once more. Tyran replied casually, I'm just living by what my mother taught me. Then he asked curiously, but what brings you out to this remote countryside? Charon smiled and answered, I've been entrusted to handle a matter. Surprised, he asked back, a matter? So Charon explained, they're looking for someone capable of killing that black leopard-like monster. I am a wizard. At that, Tyran's face froze. He gently said, then you must be the wizard our village elder mentioned. The man admitted nonchalantly, that would be me. May I ask you a question? Tiran responded promptly, "Please do." Charon probed, "I can strongly sense the presence of a monster in this area, yet I see no trace of any ferocious creature nearby. What's stranger is that you clearly know about the Elder and that monster, yet you remain oddly calm, with no sign of running or hiding. If that monster targets humans, you could easily be its prey. Aren't you even a little afraid? You seem remarkably brave for a shepherd who's never left this town, don't you? So who exactly are you?" An answer surfaced in Tiran's mind. A wizard returned from the past. Tiran naively asked his mother, "Why can't everyone know I'm a wizard, mother?" She replied worriedly, "Because of the wicked nobles out there." He probed further, "Wicked nobles?" His mother explained sadly, "If nobles were merely shepherds like us, then the knights are no more than the dogs those nobles keep at home. They may treat you with familial affection, but they're ready to sell you off or turn you into a sacrificial offering whenever they see fit. Mother would never want her child to live a life like that. Tiran, you also want to stay by my side, don't you?" Tiran naively answered, "Yes, ma'am." Then she instructed, "So remember this, no one must know that your mother's child is a wizard. Especially other wizards. If they catch wind, they'll separate you from your mother, turn you into their hunting hounds, and be ready to discard you at any time. And to avoid being exposed as a wizard, you may have to take someone's life with your own hands." Tiran's gaze went cold and sharp. He wasn't joking at all when he mentioned that. After all, everything had come to this point. Charon struggled to placate him. "Why are you silent?" He also realized Tiran was completely serious. Charon could only force a smile. "That serious look of yours ruins my joke." Only then did Tiran's expression relax. He exhaled. "That was a joke just now." He said apologetically, "Forgive me, I'm not very quick with jokes." Charon also stood and approached. "No, it's my fault. I should apologize for making you uncomfortable." Tiran laughed and explained, "It's the first time I've heard a joke about wizards, so I was a bit startled." Charon was courteous in return. "Your reaction was so entertaining I teased a bit too much." He extended his hand and reminded him, "I just realized we haven't had a proper greeting. Pleased to meet you." Charon smiled and introduced himself. "My name is Charon, a lone traveler." Tiran returned the handshake. "How rude of me. I should have introduced myself first." He smiled. "My name is Tiran, an ordinary shepherd." The two sat down to eat and began a friendly conversation. Tiran mentioned, "I'm just 18 this year." Charon replied, "As for me, I'm 75. Tiran was surprised. "You still look robust and much younger than your years." Charon explained without hesitation, "Wizards tend to age slowly and live longer than ordinary people." Tiran asked curiously, "What made someone like you choose a wanderer's life?" The question made Charon nostalgic. "I decided to leave after 60 years of service to the Arabian family." He recounted, "In these later years, I only wanted the freedom to travel without being bound by anything." Tiran thought to himself, "It sounds like a free and romantic ideal." Their conversation stretched on, warming Tiran. They enjoyed a pleasant exchange. And Charon smiled happily throughout the evening. The nighttime atmosphere inside the house gave Tiran a sense of ease and peace. With such a virtuous companion, it was surprisingly delightful. They talked until the sun peeked over the mountain ridges outside the window. Charon suddenly realized, "Has it gotten so late?" Tiran smiled. "You're right, I was so absorbed in conversation I didn't notice dawn breaking." Charon pushed back his chair and stood. "It's time for me to continue my journey." He slid a coin across the table. "Take this Arabian silver. It's the purest silver, enough to pay for my meal." Tiran gladly accepted. "I gratefully accept your kindness. May your hunt go well." Charon teased, "Don't speak as if we'll never meet again." Before leaving, he looked back fondly. Who knows, I may return a few times to bother you for food." The sky brightened over the hills behind the town. The sheep contentedly grazed on the vast meadow. Chiran called out loudly, "All together now." The sheep lifted their heads at the sound. They gradually moved toward him. Chiran rarely felt as relieved as he did today. It was the first time he'd met another wizard. More importantly, how long had it been since he'd enjoyed such a relaxed conversation? He happily stroked a sheep's head. The easygoing manner and natural humor always shone through his words. He was warmer than any adult Chiran had ever met. That very dusk, Charon reappeared at Chiran's door with a hunted wolf slung over his shoulder. "I'm back," Chiran exclaimed. "He truly is an honorable man." He completely changed his own assumptions. He had previously thought knights were soulless machines, controlled like tools by arrogant nobles. Chiran returned to town with a different worry. How should he report this to the village elder? On a trail through the woods, Charon walked, thinking the land of Hisaril was now free of monsters. He quietly scanned his surroundings. The truth was, the fallen, broken trees around him reminded Charon of something. Signs of a battle remained, but there was no trace of the monster. He stopped before a large tree whose trunk had split from an embedded stone. Could the monster have been slain? Charon stared at it, pondering. Who would have the ability to hunt it? Or had the village elder secretly hired another wizard besides him? He exhaled softly. In any case, it was a relief, so long as the monster was gone and the people were safe. A gut feeling snapped Charon wide awake, suddenly on high alert. He quickly spun his head around. A giant leopard-like monster's paw slowly stepped forward, exuding a black, fetid stench. Its head had utterly deformed into a hideously ugly shape. Yet the sheer force of that leopard's power radiated danger. Charon froze momentarily. Wait, is this a monster? He recoiled in panic. Who could have been so irresponsible? The leopard monster swiftly raised its paw to strike Charon. Its clawing made the ground shake violently, but Charon leapt up and narrowly avoided it. He calmed himself and analyzed the situation. If a monster's corpse isn't absorbed or its magic purified after death, it will become a vengeful wraith like this. A wizard who hunts monsters would never make such a basic mistake. The leopard monster continued its frenzied attacks aimed at Charon. He was baffled. Obviously, the one who killed this monster must have been a wizard, so why leave it to become a wraith? Charon wondered, did the killer truly not know the consequences of leaving that source of magic? No rookie, however green, would be unaware of this. Otherwise, they wouldn't have faced it in the first place. Charon conjured a golden orb of mana in his hand. Or does he have some other scheme? Whatever the case, I must destroy it immediately. The magic condensed into a sustained beam of light. Charon directed it at the leopard monster. But the technique seemed unable to inflict any damage. Charon was astonished by the monster's power. My spells have no effect. That means this creature's magic far exceeds my control. He suddenly panicked when he saw only a pool of black water left before him. Where had it gone? Charon struggled to reason. Is it preparing to use magic to counter magic? Where is it? From the shadow behind him, a bubbling stream of water surged forth. The leopard monster appeared behind Charon, roaring wildly. It slashed in a way Charon couldn't dodge. His arm was gravely wounded, blood flowing profusely. This was not an opponent an ordinary knight could contend with. At minimum, it would take a low-ranking noble to have any hope of victory. Charon was knocked backward. He seemed to be growing exhausted, his breath heavy. Who would have thought a remote mountain village would harbor such a high-level wraith? Truly, life is full of surprises. Charon began to give in to the leopard monster's overwhelming power. It seems my fate ends here. He bowed his head, his eyes black with despair. Charon gritted his teeth. But I will not go quietly. Even if I die, I'll drag you down with me. He concentrated immense mana in his hand. I'll pour all remaining magic into my palm and strike directly the moment it lunges. The leopard monster lunged at the same time. Charon staked everything on this final blow. His expression was resolute. He leapt forward as the leopard monster raised its claws high. At that moment, a massive bolt of mana came flying from another direction. It knocked the leopard monster away as it was about to strike Charon. Debris rained down, leaving Charon stunned. The leopard monster was defeated, sprawled motionless on the ground, with a single strike. The attacker called out, "Are you all right?" Charon smiled faintly in reply. The shepherd's joke startled a person too. He turned to see Tyran approaching calmly. "Tyran!" Charon exclaimed in surprise. "So you are a wizard?" Tyran acknowledged. "Yes, that's right." Charon blurted out, "Why did you hide it from me before?" The silence stretched, leaving him helpless. "No, let me ask this instead. Why did you intervene to save me now? You could easily have left without getting involved." Tyran mouthed, "Because." In the late-night silence at Tyran's house, the wolf lay motionless on the floor. He tilted his head curiously. What was the need to go to such lengths? Charon, puzzled, asked again, "What do you mean?" Tyran explained, "I don't know what the village elder promised you, but I believe with your abilities you could earn far more with ease." Charon laughed loudly. "They truly are pitiable people." Tyran bowed his head thoughtfully. "What's pitiable about them?" Charon leaned back comfortably. "They live on this frontier, always trembling in fear with no minimal protection." Tyran interrupted, "But that's not your responsibility or fault, is it?" Charon thought differently. He expressed, "The duty of wizards is to inherit the power of the divine. Therefore we should live proudly in protecting the lowly people." He closed his eyes and sighed. "Perhaps not every wizard shares my ideals. Each person has their own thoughts and path." Thinking of that made Tyran smile softly. He replied calmly, "Doesn't everyone have the right to choose their own way of life?" The leopard monster recovered its strength and suddenly attacked the two of them. Charon quickly regained his composure and warned, "Listen to me, this is not something we can face." He insisted, "This is the kind of monster you can't defeat, unless you're a noble. Hurry and alert the village elder and help everyone evacuate." The leopard monster transformed into a pair of eerie blue eyes with a twitching body. Charon rose to face it. "I'll stay here to hold it off." He watched the leopard monster with worry, thinking to himself, "I may talk tough, but I don't know how much longer I can hold out." Tyran couldn't help interrupting, "It'll be fine." He manipulated a roadside stone. "I believe if the attack just now hit its mark, everything will be all right." Charon stared blankly. "What are you muttering about?" Tyran's calm made him quietly realize. Could it be that the previous strike wasn't even his full strength? A young knight hiding on a mountain yet capable of hunting a wraith requires noble-level power in practice. The seasoned knight Charon pondered this. What he was witnessing now was not merely a random rural encounter. Countless small stones hovered in the air under Tyran's mana, hardly the impulsive act of a young knight trying to escape the nobility. They all exploded in unison with Tyran, greatly enriching the mana around him, the scene unfolding before them. He smiled. It could very well be the beginning of a wizard who will change this world. Tyran replied to Charon, "I'm also very curious about my true limits." Charon was enraged upon hearing that. "I absolutely will not allow you to act like that. No matter how great your talent is, that entity is still an extremely terrifying opponent." He instructed, "When the beast raises its claws, we must coordinate with each other." But before it could attack, Tyran struck first, sending it flying. Charon finally realized the gap in their strength. No, if I rush in now, I'll only be a hindrance. I couldn't even react in time to that blow. He withdrew the mana from his hands. At this moment, I can't be of any help. What needs to be done now? Charon prudently stepped aside to watch Turan's powerful magic erupt. It was to let Turan's talent shine brilliantly. Although Turan looked calm on the outside, he seemed to be struggling. Damn it! He leapt back to avoid the beast's attack, which remained intact and had no effect. Charon shouted a warning. You can't finish a spirit with ordinary physical attacks. Turan retreated out of the beast's strike path and asked, then how am I supposed to destroy it? Along with Charon's reminder, use fire, Turan raised his hand. His eyes lit up. Charon hesitated, or lightning would work too. A blaze of red surged forward, scorching the beast's hide. Turan frowned in confusion. Still no effect. Charon shouted, not like that. He thought silently. To impose a mage's power onto another living creature, establishing causal rules is the fundamental prerequisite. Don't tell me he's ignorant of the most basic knowledge of a mage. Charon suddenly realized, could it be? He watched Turan's back as he deftly evaded the beast's pursuit. Was he the one who killed the creature and then left it to become a spirit? Does that mean Turan never once absorbed mana in his life? Charon had to loudly instruct, don't just kindle a fire, create it and then launch it at him. He was also surprised by this power. Has he already reached such a level of strength? Turan stopped running. He channeled mana, and a crimson flame appeared in his hand. Charon stood aside observing everything. If you are a mage, creating a flame isn't that difficult, but controlling it requires specialized training. Turan raised the flame and it became a gigantic fire. That made Charon exclaim, and he can do that immediately. Turan swiftly ran forward, and he hurled the glowing orb at the beast. The great flame quickly engulfed it, its body burning fiercely as the beast writhed in agony on the ground. Charon shouted, maintain your focus. You need to continuously channel mana so the fire doesn't die out. With his careful guidance, Turan gradually completed it. You must burn away every trace of that spirit's existence. The flames flickered, illuminating his concentrated eyes. Before long, the beast could no longer struggle. Charon exhaled in relief. We've won. He was still stunned. It truly was an absurdly powerful spirit entity. A spirit would need at least noble rank strength to be able to resist it. Charon's pupils contracted, yet he was able to defeat it. Turan turned to ask Charon, is everything really over? The contrasting image shook him to his core. A shepherd from the high mountains could perform such a miracle. Charon stepped closer. If you don't want to face another spirit, first absorb the mana. Turan asked in confusion, how am I supposed to do that? Charon instructed, imagine you're drawing something deep into your body. Turan raised his hand. All right. His eyes squeezed shut. A great flow of mana surged out from the beast's body. It gathered beneath Turan's hands and flowed into him. His eyes also reflected the beast's power. Now every vein in Turan could feel the boiling mana coursing through his body. This novelty shook him. Charon smiled and explained, you'll feel a particular kind of pleasure. Even seeing it with my own eyes, I still find it hard to believe. He asked again, so this really is your first time absorbing mana? Turan clenched his fist. Yes. Charon watched his retreating back thoughtfully. After the first awakening, the mana reservoir grows over the years. The best way to increase power is to kill beasts or other mages and take their mana. He calculated, but this is Turan's first time absorbing mana, yet he can control magic so skillfully. This shows his innate potential is on an entirely different level. Charon finally realized, meaning this youth is. He spoke Turan. He looked up. What is it? Charon solemnly bowed. I behaved very rudely toward you. May I presumptuously ask which family you belong to? Charon replied with deep respect, yes. Chiran looked at his bloodied arm and reminded him, please wipe the blood off yourself first. After returning, Charon also bandaged his wound. He repeated once more, please forgive my disrespect. To have someone noble like you involved in such matters, I can only sincerely apologize. Chiran replied angrily, I've told you many times I'm not noble. I'm just a shepherd. I don't even know who my father is. He frowned, so please don't treat me like that anymore. Charon relented. All right, don't look at me with that expression. He wondered, but why would a powerful mage like you choose shepherding? I don't mean to belittle you, but the job seems hardly fitting. Chiran recalled, it was my mother's wish. She told me to live like this until she passed away. Charon murmured, your mother's wish. Chiran repeated his mother's words. Down at the foot of the mountain are only sly nobles. If my identity as a mage were exposed, they'd use me and discard me without mercy. Charon expressed regret. She was truly a wise woman. Chiran was also surprised. I was a bit surprised because I thought you'd call it overprotective parenting. Charon answered, your mother isn't entirely wrong. He bowed his head, face sorrowful. Mages hold great power, and great power always brings disputes. Just over 20 years ago, a brutal great war broke out among the great houses. Charon's memories were full of sorrow. It was the battle between the Arabian clan I once devoted myself to and the great house Zahar. I don't know how many lives were lost in that war. He recounted, of around 3,000 Arabian knights at that time, over 900 perished. Nearly 1/3 of them fell. Chiran was deeply interested in Charon's tale. How bitter! All those close to me were among that fateful third. He recalled sadly, Brother Denver, who always dreamed of opening a laundromat once the smoke cleared. Master Hartman, who sternly taught me because I had so many shortcomings to overcome. And my wife and beloved son as well. They were all slain by the Zahar house. I was the sole survivor. Charon fell silent. That's why your mother was right in a sense. The life of a knight can be snuffed out pointlessly and is more fragile than that of a commoner. He warned, however, there is one thing she misjudged your talent. Chiran asked curiously, my talent? Charon scratched his head. It's shameful to admit this in such dire circumstances, but I was a fairly capable knight. Yet you could effortlessly defeat that bizarre spirit entity, something I couldn't subdue. He assessed, your potential isn't limited to the level of an ordinary knight. At minimum, you've already touched noble rank. Charon glanced at Chiran, and among them, you certainly belong to the upper tier in terms of aptitude. Chiran spoke up. My mother said my father was a knight. Could that have been a lie? Charon intrigued. In rare cases, a child with lesser aptitude than a knight can be born into a noble family, or conversely, a child with noble talent can be born into a knightly family. Seen that way, I think it's best you leave this hill to venture out and explore the wide world beyond. Chiran was surprised. Why is that? Charon replied kindly. Because humanity is desperate for more talented nobles and knights. Humanity does not yet fully dominate this world. He pondered and recounted tales from the ancient days. Other races, cast off by the gods, are always lurking for a chance to rise again. Charon's voice turned slightly angry, and in that context, the nobles are busy tearing each other apart in their struggles for power. The door opened slightly. That's why this era yearns to find strong nobles with compassionate hearts like yours. Before leaving, Charon asked, above all, you yourself aren't satisfied with this dull life of shepherding, are you? The question made Chiran fall silent for a moment. His retreating figure betrayed a hint of loneliness. What could I achieve down at the foot of the mountain? Charon had no perfect answer. That entirely depends on what you desire. He smiled warmly. Wealth, fame, status, a family, or true friendships, whichever it is, it's extremely hard to find here, isn't it? Charon turned and reminded him. Imagine, you could be a righteous hero like me, slaying the monsters that threaten the people. He left with a final suggestion. Or become an explorer setting foot in uncharted lands, or even be taken in by a house and walk the path of vying for power. Tyran ran after Charon to the door, hearing him reason. I think what you say makes sense. He stood opposite Charon. That would certainly be far more interesting than tending sheep here year-round. Tyran gave a wry smile. For the first time in my life, I'm actually curious about the world outside. Charon's encouragement seemed to have an effect. Still, he worried. I'm sowing baseless hopes for you. I will always support whichever path you choose. He suddenly remembered. Right, what exactly is your bloodline ability? I should have asked this from the start, but Tyran looked puzzled. What is a bloodline ability? Charon bowed his head. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting you don't know much about magic. He explained. A bloodline ability is a trait nobles inherit from their ancestors. Whether one possesses a bloodline ability is the dividing line between a noble and a knight. Charon raised his hand and conjured a small magical flame as an example. Is there any spell that feels particularly easy and natural for you to cast, or some innate ability that doesn't rely on magic? Tyran clenched his fist, guessing. You don't mean that I'm simply very strong, do you? Charon replied. Having mana is enough to enhance a mage's physique. Tyran recalled his body. I have a very keen sense of smell, and I'm also pretty good at throwing stones. Charon then speculated. If your sense of smell is unusually sharp, that could also be considered a bloodline ability. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. And the ability to hit the mark every time with ranged weapons is one of the signatures of the Arabian house. However, that's also a fairly common trait. Charon asked with interest, Go on, tell me more. Tyran nodded, all right. After a while of conversation, Charon concluded, I understand now. Tyran asked anxiously, What's wrong with you? He couldn't hide his curiosity at Charon's serious expression. Why do you suddenly look like that? Charon spoke. I think I've realized which house your ability most closely resembles. Tyran tilted his head. Which house is that, sir? Charon kept his head bowed the whole time. A famed great house. He recalled that house's savagery and his own past pain, known by the title of trackers or master hunters. Those who suffered losses in the war were the Zahar house, the ones who confronted the Arabian house directly back then. Tyran was stunned and unbelieving when he heard those words. The Zahar house. Cold sweat ran down his face. Tyran's eyes widened, silently repeating in his head, the great Zahar house. Thinking that, Tyran swallowed and furtively watched Charon, who sat in silence beside him. Was he saying I share blood with his enemy? He bit his lip lightly, his thoughts in turmoil. What should I say to him? Should I apologize? But these are acts of relatives I've never met, they're strangers to me. Suddenly Charon called, Tyran. He replied quickly, Senior. Before Tyran could say anything, Charon patted his shoulder gently to comfort him. Don't look so worried. You weren't involved in that war. Even so, Tyran still felt very uneasy. But Charon offered a slightly relieved smile and advised, That's an adult matter. If blood debt is repaid with blood, grievances will never end. Hearing that, Tyran suddenly asked, Don't you feel regret? Charon's eyes flickered and he asked back, About what? A gentle breeze blew by, carrying his somewhat heavy words about telling me to go down the mountain. Charon lowered his eyes slightly and explained in a grave tone, If you go down the mountain and pursue power, sooner or later you'll join the Zahar house. After all, you are very talented. But I believe in your character. Charon's words surprised Tyran greatly. What do you mean? He lifted his head and looked at him with full trust. I'm speaking of the goodness in you. You saved me and even revealed the identity you've spent your life hiding. Conversely, if someone like you were to join the Zahar house and attain high rank, perhaps it could prevent such a brutal war from happening again. The more Tiran heard, the more he fell into thought and remained silent. Seeing this, Charon stepped past him. Before leaving, he earnestly advised, "Well, there's no need to think so grimly. After all, you haven't decided whether to join the Zahar house yet." No sooner had he finished than Tiran spoke firmly, "My mind is made up now." He smiled faintly and turned to look at Charon. "I want to try going down the mountain." Charon heard this and laughed with satisfaction. "It's good that you've come to that thought." But then Tiran added, "But not right now." He faced Charon and calmly said, "I'll go down the mountain after your wounds have fully healed." Those words moved him deeply. "How kind. I'm only scratched up a little. Truly, you are a very good person." A while later, inside the warm wooden house, Charon put on a serious face and explained, "To use magic, you must have mana. That's why mana is often called the universal key." Tiran sat across, repeating curiously, "The universal key," Charon's stern voice answered. "It's not truly an all-powerful force as the name suggests, but to wield magic you need a corresponding amount of mana." Tiran asked, puzzled, "What is the standard for having mana that matches a spell?" He calmly continued, "I'll explain that now." Then he held up 3 fingers. The difficulty of a spell is mostly determined by 3 factors. First is bloodline, second is affinity, and third is the law of cause and effect. Next, Charon explained each point to Tiran. First, bloodline is decided by the blood you carry at birth. This applies to most nobles who are not knights. For example, it's very difficult for you to heal my wounds with magic, isn't it? He heard this and replied, "That's right." Immediately a region came to Charon's mind and he continued, "But for the Ravista bloodline from the south, that's something they can do even without training. That's power derived from bloodline." Tiran lowered his eyes to his palm and asked, "What about the second factor, affinity?" Charon continued, "You can think of it as familiarity. It's the concept that a mage can perform actions more easily with things they like or are accustomed to." Tiran understood and said, "Like how I form a fireball as if throwing a stone." Seeing this, he stood up pleased. "Exactly. If you merely produced fire, you might not achieve that speed or impact." And the final factor, the most important, is the law of cause and effect. Even I don't fully understand it yet. At that, Charon suddenly posed a question. "What would happen if you deliberately used mana to kill me directly?" Tiran, puzzled but honest, answered, "Maybe a few sparks would flash from my head and that's it." As he spoke, he reached out and cast magic on the cup on the table. That's precisely the phenomenon caused by the lack of the law of cause and effect, causing the spell to fail. Under the curling electric current, bubbles like boiling water gradually appeared inside the previously empty cup. When there is no appropriate cause for a desired result, and the goal is excessively difficult to achieve, that's when this law takes effect. After watching and listening, Tiran seemed to grasp it. "I think I understand the law of cause and effect to some extent now." Then he calmly launched a small flame toward the boiling cup. "If I wanted to kill you, instead of wasting mana hopping for death, I'd need to create a cause that leads to death. For example, produce and shoot a flame, right? Creating fire and launching it looks more natural than directly burning someone." Charon's eyes lit up as if he discovered a treasure. "Exactly. You could have been a scholar instead of a mage." Tiran withdrew his magic, rubbed his chin and murmured, "But I can control ordinary animals at will, so why do magical beasts need those conditions?" Charon shrugged casually and explained, "It's because of their mana reserves." After that, the two of them discussed for a long time inside the wooden house. Long after, Tiran finally broke into a sweat and sighed softly. "Magic really isn't easy, is it? Immediately, Charon's grave voice rang out. An outstanding mage must not only know how to use mana, but also understand the principles and circumstances behind it. He looked up at him and asked, "Now that I think about it, does the Zahar bloodline have any special magic?" Charon paused briefly, then replied bluntly, "They're very skilled at stealth and tracking." Then he suggested, "Let's try it once." Charon heard this and quickly stood from his chair. "All right." He closed his eyes and silently thought, "I don't want to be seen. I wish no sound or scent would be detected." Immediately, part of his body gradually turned into a wisp of white smoke. Charon, not seeing Charon's astonished face, hesitated and asked, "Is it working?" Before him, his figure was gone, leaving only a faint ripple blending into the air. A few seconds later, Charon came to his senses and replied, "You did it. I can't see you anymore." Saying that, he couldn't help but swallow softly. Because at that moment the space before him was completely empty, not even a ripple remained. But in an instant, Charon gradually reappeared in his original spot. Charon looked at him and spoke, his tone betraying amazement. "It's been a long time since I've seen it, but it's still a terrifying ability. In battle, the Arabian knights feared that power above all." Charon listened, thoughtful and moved. "This seems like an overwhelmingly powerful ability, almost unfair, doesn't it?" However, Charon did not entirely agree. "But remember, it's not invincible." He did not continue the subject and quickly turned to leave. "Now I'll teach you some magic training methods." This made Charon even more puzzled. Is he teaching too much to a mage of the enemy house? But Charon only spoke gently. "You saved my life and even healed me. Didn't I already say?" Charon lowered his eyes, placed a hand on his chest, and said with conviction, "I trust your character." Sometime later, when the village chief heard the news, he twisted his face and shouted, "What? Are you planning to sell the flock and leave?" He looked at Charon, who was packing a pillow and blanket to depart, and angrily scolded, "So who will tend the sheep from now on? How can you decide this on your own without consulting us?" Hearing this, he retorted resentfully with his eyes shut, "Find yourselves a new shepherd. What I do with my property is none of your business." His successive threats made the villagers shrink back in fear. "In any case, I hope you'll buy the flock at a fair price. Otherwise, I'll release them all and leave alone. And you can go catch them yourselves, though it'll be quite a chore." A villager, worried, quietly called, "Chief." He was grinding his teeth and pressing his lips, silently calculating. "This bastard is one who will do what he says. Angering him brings no benefit." In the end, the chief had to compromise and handed Charon a purse of money. "All right, I understand. Leave or stay, do as you wish." After that, he left the village together with Charon. Charon suddenly frowned as if remembering something and said, "I just remembered. The villagers still owe you compensation after everything that happened. Should I go collect it?" Charon merely smiled lightly, unconcerned. "I have no intention of taking it, and you were the one who caught the magical beast, weren't you?" Hearing that, he no longer bothered. "All right, then." Charon paused briefly, looked at the two diverging paths before them, and continued, "We must part ways here." Before leaving, Charon cast him a regretful glance. "I'm sorry I declined your offer to travel together. I feel more comfortable as a lone wanderer." Charon shrugged with a relaxed smile and replied, "No problem at all. Thank you for everything." Charon closed his eyes and softly bid farewell. "Charon, take care." He returned the smile brightly and promised, "Yes, I hope we can meet again with smiles on our faces." And so the boy stood watching as Charon's figure slowly faded away for a very long time. Only much later did he realize why he didn't want Charon to address him so formally. Although he never lacked his mother's love, deep inside the boy there was a yearning for the image of a father. Someone who could be an ideal model of the strong man the boy would become. Time passed, and a messy trail of footprints stretched across the sand. All around was a desolate, empty desert, where only the wind howled through the giant rock outcrops. From afar, a hooded figure was slowly approaching. The person was none other than Tyran. Suddenly, he widened his eyes as if he'd spotted something. Not far from Tyran, a group of people were slowly making their way toward him. Were they merchant caravans traveling from village to village? Tyran couldn't help but feel secretly relieved. That's great. Quickly, he stepped forward alone to block their path. Let's go ask them for directions. The leader saw this and demanded, "Who are you to dare block our way?" Tyran immediately explained honestly and asked, "I'm traveling alone. May I ask for directions to the nearest city?" The group replied, "If you follow the road we came from, you'll find a city called Mure." His tone puzzled him somewhat, but he calmly answered, "I understand." Saying that, Tyran slowly walked past them. "Thank you very much for the directions." But someone suddenly stepped forward to block him. "Hold on." He sneered cruelly and asked, "You get the information and just leave?" Tyran was shocked. "What?" However, he quickly regained his composure and a killing intent slowly flashed in his eyes. "So what?" The man, unaware, continued to demand. "If someone helps you, you should at least show some gratitude." Before the sentence finished, the men around drew their swords and surrounded Tyran. "First, drop that bulging bag." He glanced around and immediately understood the situation. "Highway robbery," the man who had stopped him said arrogantly. "So what if we are robbers?" The leader, shouldering a long sword, curled his lip in disdain. "Call it folly if you like. This is abandoned land. It's not strange if someone dies here, right?" Then he thrust the point of his sword toward Tyran's throat and threatened, "Drop your bag and cloak. While we're being merciful to you, killing you and stripping you would be messy with blood and take much more effort." But to the man's surprise, Tyran spoke calmly. "I see. These highway robbers would even kill without mercy." At the same time, he quickly recalled Charon's earlier lesson, especially the moment he grasped the third element, the law of cause and effect, and the other things Charon had taught him afterward. Tyran curled one corner of his mouth, eyeing the robbers like moving sandbags. "I'll just use you as targets to train on." A sly, sinister look showed beneath his cloak. "Looks like I'll have to use you as practice dummies." His gaze suddenly froze, puzzled by the laughter. The gang leader sneered contemptuously. "This lunatic speaks as if he's a mage." An underling eagerly chimed in, "Exactly, boss." Pale fingers flicked out a current of air. Tyran swept his arm widely backward, creating a gale that scattered them all. He pulled off his hood to reveal his sharp eyes. "So instead of just moving air from the atmosphere, shaping it with your hands and amplifying it wastes far less mana." Tyran still pondered seriously. "I didn't know you could produce such a strong wind with so little mana." As the others began to scramble up, "What the heck is happening?" He calmly opened the lid of a water skin. The droplets instantly transformed into sharp points. Under his control, they all aimed in the same direction. One of the robber's eyes rolled white in fear. The thrown blades pierced him, forcing him backward. Tyran spread his palms ready to receive an attack. This ought to be a useful magic when there's plenty of water around. To be honest, throwing those stones by hand felt even quicker and stronger. The gang leader, terrified, hurriedly begged, "We didn't know you were a great mage. Please have mercy and spare us this time." While he spoke to distract Tyran, the others lunged forward. "We'll hand over anything you want. So please spare our lives, we beg you." Tyran decisively lifted one foot to the proper height. He stomped down, and a surge of sand behind him attacked all the robbers. The leader watched, his face going pale. "Impossible." Tyran, wearing a terrifying expression, looked down in silence. "Have they all perished?" His voice finally rose slowly. Let me ask you something. The man crouched there submissively and answered politely, "Yes, great mage, I will answer anything you ask." Tiran stared at him and asked directly, "Why did you dare attack me without any plan? If I were just a lone traveler, the land might still hold a mage like me." The leader's voice faltered, "Because you bowed." At that Tiran's pupils dilated. "What?" He hung his head, sweating. "Even when we spoke rudely, you still bowed and greeted us politely, so we assumed you were merely a weak, ordinary person." Tiran's face went cold and expressionless. "Thank you very much. That taught me a very useful lesson." Hearing this, the leader looked up with hopeful excitement. "So you'll keep your word and spare me, right?" But what he didn't expect was a transforming drop of water appearing right above his head. Cut to a moment when Charon was calmly speaking. "Tiran, from now on you'll meet many people out there. And there's one thing I insist on teaching you thoroughly." Tiran held the packed backpack in his lap and listened intently. Charon continued, "Never show any mercy to scum like those highway robbers. They never hesitate to harm others to grab what they want." A sharp sword lay quietly on the table. "The reason I must warn you so sternly is because—" At that instant, he answered very seriously, "I think I understand why." Tiran now stood before the motionless corpse of the gang leader. "Because a life you spare out of weak pity could come back and directly harm 10 other innocent people around you." His face remained calm as he murmured, "I've delayed here long enough." Tiran carefully walked over the sand, following the wheel tracks along the road where that merchant caravan had dragged their wagon. The heavy wheel ruts were clearly cut into the sand layers. He walked alone along, leaving a thought etched deep into Tiran's mind. His lips pressed together as he kept walking forward without looking back. "I've killed someone." The terrified face of the gang leader flashed in his mind. He felt guilty, but he really couldn't just let them go. Charon's warning came back to him clearly once more. He also recalled the moment the robbers tried to ambush him from behind. Those who, without a second thought, ruthlessly rob and slaughter for profit would surely target other civilians whenever they wished. Suddenly his boots stopped at an edge. Like the wheel tracks in the desert fading as grass grew over them, Tiran's chaotic heart gradually calmed as he remembered Charon's teachings. He paused, looking up at the clear sky, then resumed walking into a completely new, different world. His eyes kept scanning, and he murmured in admiration, "So this is the place, the small town of Mure." Along the road, a mother walked holding her daughter's hand. Tiran, backpack on his back, slowly entered curiously. It was the first time in his life he'd seen so many people gathered so densely. A tall, sturdy building appeared here. Even the architectural style was starkly different from the small village before. Tiran kept strolling through the town, watching silently. Now he truly felt he'd arrived at a real city. He now stood before a fruit stall. "May I ask something?" The vendor cheerfully replied, "Oh, hello." The seller promptly asked his needs. "What would you like to buy?" Tiran politely raised a hand. Actually, I'm not here to buy anything." Again, Charon's advice came to mind. "If you arrive in a city and need a place to rest, look for a nearby inn. Whether in a village or a city, there's usually an inn available." Now the vendor waved him off annoyed. "If you're not buying fruit, then clear off." Tiran fell silent, unable to comprehend the seller's rudeness. Why was he acting so coarse? Was there some unwritten rule in cities like this that you had to buy fruit before you were allowed to ask questions? Thinking that, Tiran pointed at a red fruit. "How much is this?" The seller curtly answered. 2 ducat coins." Tiran calmly counted a few coins in his palm. 2 ducat coins. The vendor remained rude. "You look like an outsider, so you probably don't know what that is, right? You can pay with another currency if you want." Tiran reached to place a coin into the vendor's hand. "Where can I find an inn?" The seller easily gave detailed directions. Go straight down the road behind that cloak shop, then turn left. You'll certainly see a building with a blue roof, with a wooden sign hanging outside that has 3 characters on it. That's the largest inn in the whole town. A pretty girl appeared inside the inn. Welcome to our inn, inn staff member Lena. The moment she saw Tyran, she unexpectedly complimented him. You're quite a handsome guest. He smiled lightly. How much for one night? Lena smiling cheerfully as she quoted the price, 16 ducat coins. Upon hearing that, he replied, I'll take it. Tyran pushed a small purse of coins toward her. More importantly, there's something I'd like to ask. Lena received him gently. What would you like to ask? Without beating around the bush, Tyran asked directly, Are there any monsters around here with bounties on them? Lena paused slightly on hearing, Monsters. His gaze was firm and his face serious as he waited for an answer. I need to start hunting monsters and find a way to absorb as much mana from them as possible. And he also said that monster hunting can earn money. Tyran couldn't wait and naively asked, Why won't you answer me? Lena burst into laughter, tilting her head to one side. Sir. She raised her left hand. There's nothing in this world that's completely free, is there? Are those sealed boxes in the corner of the town halls? Tyran, now seated at a table holding a cup of water, asked, What's that? Lena looked at him, a bit surprised. You don't know about the town hall, you really are from the countryside. Tyran listened quietly as she explained. The town hall handles many affairs, and the officials who work there are hired directly by the city's lord. Lena looked at him and said, It's probably closed now since the sun has fully set. If you want to look for monster hunting bounties, go to the town hall tomorrow. Lena stood opposite him with one hand on her hip. So you're a monster hunter too? Tyran sat upright and asked calmly, What's a monster hunter? A burly body like that is thought to withstand tremendous energy. Rumor says if an ordinary person slays a monster, they'll surely become a mage. You also want to become a mage quickly, right? Lena focused on the conversation. Of course, only a fool would believe such superstition. Suddenly, a hand was placed on his shoulder from behind. Superstition. A man with blonde hair appeared behind him. It's true, someone can become a mage by slaying monsters. I've seen it with my own eyes. And he was the monster hunter Mage. Lena noticed his arrival and asked, Mage, you're still alive? Mage looked nonchalant. I told you I won't rest until I become the first mage. Tyran raised his hand to gesture at him. Mage withdrew his hand and laughed. Oh, how rude of me. Tyran took the opportunity to ask seriously, More importantly, can I hear more about what you just said? Mage looked him in the face and answered about how one could become a great mage by killing monsters. Lena sat at the table, idly holding a lute, listening to their conversation. Mages grow stronger when they go out hunting monsters. By the same principle, if a normal person manages to slay a monster, they can become a mage themselves. Mage looked at the 4 men behind him. The 4 of us are out hunting monsters to become mages. One of them crossed his arms confidently. That's right, exactly. Tyran, a little surprised but serious, looked at them. So does that mean someone here is already a mage? They answered immediately. No way. In this town there is only the Lord's mage and 3 subordinates under him. Mage spoke casually and laughed. But didn't you say you've hunted monsters before? With that gear of yours you'd be at a big disadvantage. Don't you have any weapon at all? Tyran produced an item before them. I do. Mage recognized it at once. A slingshot, huh? Just look at the wear on it. You've clearly used it many times. Tyran sounded very earnest in the tense conversation. It's true. It's perfect for firing something the size of an egg very fast. Mage rubbed his chin and studied the slingshot. With that weapon you could easily hunt monsters like rabbits or foxes. Tyran blinked and looked at him. Actually, We were just saying we need another ranged attacker. Are you interested in hunting with our group?" His mouth opened slightly. Turan gave a half-hearted answer then, "No, but anyway." That night as he lay stretched on the bed, there was really no good reason for him to join them on a hunt. His face looked a bit hollow and extremely tired. Today was truly a chaotic day. The backpack he carried was placed neatly beside the bed. I still can't truly believe I decisively left that village. Turan held his palm up and toyed with a little mana. What will happen next from now on? His ear suddenly twitched as it picked up a sound, and he reflexively sat bolt upright, looking toward the door. Who is it? He recalled walking the barren road with Charon. Even here in an inn, he shouldn't let his guard down, right? Charon had walked beside him with a hand in his coat pocket and affirmed, "That's right." Charon looked at him kindly and gave a small smile. A city doesn't automatically guarantee safety. Hearing that, he replied, "I understand." Charon continued to warn Turan to be careful, then never lower your guard. He obediently answered, "Understood." Turan moved closer to the door, one hand already channeling mana. The room door eased open a little, giving him a view. His expression didn't change. Lena appeared at the doorway with a smile. "Lena, is that you?" she gently asked. "Are you asleep yet?" She then added her purpose. "I noticed the room is quite cold, so I thought I'd warm it for you." Turan, surprised, replied, "What?" Lena put on a tender expression as she looked at him, playing with the bow on her chest. "Do you mean something by that?" She struck a seductive pose and toyed with the bow at her chest. "What do you mean?" She was still flushed and hesitated, standing right at the doorway. "Just literally as it is." Turan stood with his legs apart and still didn't understand what literally meant. Lena began to make her move and stepped closer to him. "Just pay a little money and I'll do whatever you want." Turan, still sober, replied firmly, "What if I don't want anything?" She deliberately pressed her seductive body against him and teased, "Don't lie. Just by looking at your face I know." Unexpectedly, Turan squeezed his eyes shut, his face looking benevolent like Buddha's. Lena was suddenly left speechless, standing there with wide eyes. Kian's very stern, angry face appeared in his mind. "No." Turan stood still, looking puzzled at his expression. Always be careful with waitresses and prostitutes, since most of them carry venereal diseases. On his face, he listened seriously to the warning. "We may have strong resistance, so it's fine for us, but if you slip up and have relations with another woman, you could infect her. Don't let desire make you do something you'll regret later." Lena was now furious, her face flushed as she stomped down the stairs. The city isn't easy, huh? From that fruit stall incident earlier to Lena. Turan rolled onto his side on the bed. Even a bit of information or a small story costs money. The city really is quite cold. Someone called out in a direction emitting sound. "Hey, I have something to ask." A follower trailing behind Midden asked, "Why did you want to invite that guy along earlier? He doesn't seem very useful." Turan gave a faint smile, his face looking sorrowful. "Yeah, that's true. His tone's rude, he looks like bait for a beast." But suddenly, his eyes widened when he heard Midden say, "Looking at him reminds me of my youth. Seeing him hunt with such a weapon really worries me." Midden walked on, smiling kindly. "With me by his side, maybe he'll live a little longer." A beast hunter. Midden's follower could only accept it. After all, he's just too kind. Because of that, Turan showed a satisfied smile. "Well then." Turan stretched his hands over his head and looked up at the ceiling. "The city isn't as cold as I thought." Cut to the next day, as sunlight shone on the town hall. A man at the reception desk was flipping through some documents. "Hello, what can I do for you?" Turan politely and carefully approached and asked, "Are you the clerk here?" The receptionist replied immediately, "Do I look like anything else?" He got straight to the point. "I'm here to hunt beasts." The receptionist tilted his head, somewhat surprised. Beasts. Kian's gentle words once again surfaced in his mind. Life won't be kind to you. Back then he asked, why is that? He was sitting on a rock, stroking the fleece of the sheep. Because there's no reason for life to be kind to you either. If you want others to treat you well, it's simple. Tiran raised an eyebrow, waiting for him to continue. Reveal that you're a mage, and ordinary people will bow before you. The receptionist handed a sheet of paper to Tiran. As soon as he took it, he was instructed, don't take this outside, return it after reading. Tiran looked at the crudely drawn black crow on the paper. Is this the monster? The man answered curtly, so you think that's a cat? The receptionist continued flipping through other documents in his hand. Though it's unlikely, if you kill a monster, bring it into the city. If a mage doesn't reclaim its mana, it will turn into an undead. He kept warning him, if you kill a monster and leave it, the city law punishes that harshly, especially with execution. Tiran studied it closely while listening. I know. The fierce, deformed monsters in his mind reminded him. I know what happens if a monster becomes undead. I mustn't repeat past mistakes. Tiran deliberately asked, so the knights don't hunt monsters? The man didn't even look at him, continuing to write. Do you think those folk have that much free time? He pushed the information sheet about the crow across the table. The role of knights is to maintain security within the city. Tiran asked to confirm, so I have to hunt monsters outside the city. After getting the answer, Tiran turned and left. That's the job for ruffians like you. When the receptionist stopped chewing and looked up, he realized. Gone already. There's about to be another corpse outside the city. One eye was a dead white, with no pupil visible amid the jet black feathers. A black crow was dying, having just taken a deep stab to the chest. Those at the town hall went pale at the sight. It can't be this bad. The receptionist and two others stared at the brought crow. You brought it back this fast. Tiran stood silent at the side as he asked, did you catch it alone? He showed no special expression and replied calmly, yes. Tiran immediately asked directly for what he wanted. Where's the reward? A chubby-looking man hurried to the desk. Of course we'll give it. They put a small bag of coins into his hand. You must have had a hard time, go home and rest. He took it and replied, thank you, sir. After he left, the three of them stood around the crow discussing. Amazing, the wings still intact. Could someone really bring a crow back in this condition? The receptionist's gaze flicked, as if something had caught his attention. He could still see Tiran's presence there. Oh, you're not gone yet. Tiran nonchalantly wanted to ask more. Are there any other monsters worth hunting? He broke into a sweat in surprise. What? You're standing in the sunlight, unharmed and relaxed. Can you really keep hunting more? A banquet table laden with delicacies was set out. This is the most expensive dish on our menu. Lena exhaled after setting a pile of tasty dishes on the table. I can't believe you hunted 30 monsters in 3 days. Tiran felt that was ordinary. It's nothing. Tiran calmly enjoyed the food. You must have earned a lot. Tiran opened his eyes and said seriously, it's not just for the money. As Tiran defeated those small monsters one by one, he drained all their mana. More precisely, his target was the monster's mana. Thanks to that, he had definitely grown much stronger. Tiran looked contemplatively at his palm. His mana had increased severalfold compared to when he met Charon. His pupils didn't move as he stared, but he felt he was approaching his limit. Relying only on the mana of weak monsters would likely make it hard to get any stronger. Tiran suddenly spoke unexpectedly. Hey, Lena. Lena startled and answered at once. Yes. He casually asked a question. Nobody stole any of this, did they? Lena, standing right beside him, was certain. You ate it all by yourself. She tilted her head and complimented him in surprise. You look skinny, but you sure can eat. The inn's cook wiped his sweat with a towel. It's been a long time since I got to prepare a meal like this. I'm so glad you're eating it. Tiran rose from his chair, nodding in praise at the food. It's really delicious. The man cheerfully promised. Next time I'll cook even better. Suddenly, a hand grabbed at his hat and coat. Another arrogant guy appears from behind. Eating well all by yourself, huh? At first Tiran stayed silent and didn't bother to look back. Skinny guy's been making money lately, huh? Before the man's words finished, he took a straight punch to the face from someone in the group. He was hit and staggered back, limping. One of his comrades outside saw this and swore, "That bastard." Tiran tilted his head slightly. "I was just offering to share a bit." The arrogant man flew into a rage and threw a wild punch. "Don't get cocky." Tiran simply stood his ground and used his elbow to block the punch. As that man fell, another from behind rushed forward brandishing a chair. Tiran needed only his bare hands to knock the chair away. The man's eyes rolled upward and saw Tiran's hand poised to flick his forehead. When the strike landed, it flipped the man onto his back. Outside, Lena ground her teeth. "Don't." She shouted angrily, pinching her nose. "Don't fight in my establishment." Midden appeared and bowed politely. "Sorry, truly and sincerely sorry." Tiran stood silently before his bow and said, "I've punished both of you. I absolutely won't let this happen again." Still bowed, he explained. "We've been struggling lately, which led to this. We saw you doing well and got jealous." Then Midden signaled, "Apologize now." The two men, scared, bowed and complied, "Sorry." Tiran looked at him seriously and asked Midden, "Are you all having a hard time?" Midden averted his gaze slightly, clearly a bit embarrassed. He began to explain the situation, his hands still motionless at his sides. "We have about 3 days before we can't pay the room, but that's our problem." Tiran put a bag of coins directly in front of him. "Take this." Midden looked up at him in surprise. "Why?" Tiran calmly explained. "This is thanks for your kindness yesterday when you worried and invited me along." Midden himself was surprised to hear that. "Hey, how did you know?" Tiran cut in with a serious look. "I'm not giving it for free." Tiran wanted something in return and produced it for trade. "Share some information with me." Midden laughed and tapped his chest. "Confidence. I'm very confident about information. I'll tell you everything I know." The city then returned to its peaceful state. At first Tiran stood alone on a rather high place. "This is probably my last hunt in this city." He looked around and thought, "Midden gave me information about the next city. It's almost time to depart." At that the two sat opposite each other and talked for a long time, sharing more useful information than he expected. No matter how many times he reconsidered, Midden was truly a good person. In his memory, Midden remained a radiant man. He wasn't as mature as Charon, but he was purer and kinder. But suddenly, his gaze went blank with astonishment at something. His keen nose sniffed the strange scent arriving. "This smell is—" Tiran suddenly leapt quickly deeper into the forest. Hopping, his hunch was wrong. His pale hand pressed against a tree trunk. Tiran halted in a quiet, secluded part of the woods. Before him lay a body, murdered and slumped against the tree. He immediately recognized the man who had been anxiously covered in blood. "Isn't that Midden's companion?" The corner of his mouth twitched into a smile when he saw him. The man's eye had gone a sullen gray. And beside his motionless hand were a few small coins. Tiran sat down closer to the body, curiosity rising. What on earth happened here, Midden? He could only scowl when he glanced, and saw another person collapsed beneath a nearby tree. The one over there looked near death but still whispered. "Rabbit." Two long front teeth appeared in the dark. "Rabbit." Tiran looked over and saw a rabbit monster gnawing on a corpse. Tiran watched it carefully and slowly stood up. Its two eyes were bloodshot. and it had just leapt forward to bite off a chunk of the trunk. Tyran gritted his teeth in surprise. So fast. The rabbit monster's ears stood up sharp. He almost took the hit. Tyran took out the slingshot in his hand and spun it around continuously. Tyran widened his eyes and focused with all his strength. He swung the slingshot strap hard, aiming a sharpened metal bar at the rabbit monster. A few small stones flew with astonishing speed toward the rabbit in one spot. It was very agile and dodged them all. Seeing its movement, Tyran was seriously wary. This kid is well trained in projectile defense. One of its legs, with 3 sharp claws, readied itself. It used its astonishing speed to launch toward where he stood. Its pupils, bloodshot, fixed on a single target. The air seemed to vanish there, nothing remaining. The rabbit monster landed after missing its target. Taking advantage from behind, Tyran had prepared a small, sharp knife. A stab straight under its neck made it cry out in pain. Tyran quickly retreated and stepped back. His body withdrew toward a trunk, but it seemed to be dissipating. The rabbit monster turned back and attacked that tree. It looked ferocious, clawing continuously. Its eyes glowed fiercely. Wherever it jumped, it slashed. White smoke suddenly rose from within the forest. The rabbit monster stood in a field of fallen trees and howled up at the sky. Blood slowly trickled from its body down to the ground. Its ears drooped, and its tongue lolled out between its teeth. His black shoes reappeared on the ground. Tyran turned back when he saw the rabbit monster's body lying flat on the ground. As expected, he extended his palm toward it. His face was cold as he drew all the mana from the rabbit monster's body. A bluish light shone in his eye. The amount of mana he absorbed was much greater than from the first panther-like monster. His gaze softened back to normal. Impossible. The man sitting against a tree whispered, "Are you a mage?" Tyran did not hide and answered immediately, "Yes, that's right." The man remained curious. "Why did you reveal your identity?" Tyran asked with some concern, "Among the 4 of you, who has family to leave an heirloom to?" From the gray, nearly closed eyes of that man, tears flowed. No one. And even Midden lay in a pool of blood with vacant eyes. Brother. In Tyran's memory, he still recalled Midden's smiling face. There's a great city called Orem nearby. There's a place there called the library. Tyran was quite surprised at the idea of a library. He confirmed, "I heard there are thousands of books there." Midden said, as if reading him, "Mention books and you get excited, don't you?" He seriously wanted to know, "Did I show it?" Midden picked up the cup on the table, smiling faintly. "But I heard that library isn't open to just anyone." Taking the opportunity, Tyran asked first, "Then how do you get in?" Midden didn't hesitate to tell him, "It seems only mages are allowed in." Hearing that, Tyran stroked his chin, thoughtful. "I see." Even in that forest, his mind kept returning to the conversation. "I've decided." "Decided what?" Now Tyran stood before 3 makeshift graves. "I'll go to the great city Orem you mentioned." His expression looked a little sad, and his eyes shimmered, remembering Midden. Then he could only leave with one last line, "I hope you find happiness there." Cut to Tyran, silently standing in a long line. His face was a little smudged from travel, as he had just arrived in another city. He'd been amazed by the small town Mure. Thinking back now, he felt ashamed. This place was a grand, bustling city beyond that, the great city Orem. He followed the crowd through the city gate and into the great city. He hadn't expected so many people to want to enter. His gaze landed on several soldiers guarding the gate. Were they screening for wanted people? Tyran slowly approached in his turn. Indeed, a great city with a much more organized system. Suddenly a voice cut through his thoughts, "Stop." Tyran, confused, turned. "What's the matter?" The haughty gate guard pointed at him. "You may not enter." Tiran touched his clothes as he listened. I've never seen anyone dressed so filthy. Go over there and brush yourself off before coming in. Inside the city rose a towering building, surrounded by many kinds of trees. Small Tiran stood at its base, looking up in wonder. This was the library Midden had mentioned. In his head he couldn't help but marvel, imposing indeed. It must have been built with magic. Tiran cautiously approached the gate and wanted to ask, "Excuse me, may I ask?" The guard at the library gate answered seriously, "Yes." He stepped closer and said, "I want to enter." Kenya stated the condition. "This library is for mages only." Tiran immediately asserted himself. "I am a mage." The guard, unbelieving, stepped forward to probe. "What?" He frowned and berated him. "You dare claim to be a mage? Do you want to die? There's a lunatic for every kind of folly." Kenya even made a dismissive hand gesture, as if to shoo Tiran away. "Someone like you being a mage is ridiculous." The hand that hadn't yet touched Tiran suddenly glowed red. Kian from his memory surfaced again. Mages can recognize each other. They can sense another's mana and tell if someone is stronger than them, right? His gaze suddenly sharpened. By sensing that man's palm alone, his eyes flared blood red. The man was affected and struggled to close one eye. He was forced backwards by the pressure and fell over. "Are you all right, sir?" "I'm fine." Kenya's head was still on the ground, eyes wide in shock. This is not an ordinary mage. This person is at least noble rank or higher. He then stood up and let out a long yawn. "I am Kenya, a knight of the Balta's house. May I ask which house you hail from?" Tiran remained calm, unwilling to answer. "Is it mandatory to say in order to enter?" He then replied respectfully, "No, sir." Kenya bowed his head, his eyes darkening. "But to use the library you need permission from the head of Balta's." Tiran still didn't understand. "You mean?" Kenya immediately proceeded. "I'll contact the Balta's family right away." Meanwhile Tiran was washing his body. "All right." One of his eyes opened in annoyance. He thought it would be simpler. A maid with blonde hair appeared there as well. His long arms were being carefully wiped. Tiran sat in a bath while the maids washed him. How did it come to this? He suddenly turned and ordered them, "Stop." They all jumped. "Yes, sir." Tiran wanted privacy and deliberately asked them to leave. "Is there a problem with me bathing alone?" The maids replied timidly, "If we don't serve properly, we'll be punished." In this vast city he had to accept it. "As you wish." They obeyed. "Thank you, sir." A maid with brown hair murmured admiringly, "Wonderful." A voice rang out that startled her and made her cover her mouth. "What is it?" Tiran was carefully arranging the back of his hair after putting on the new suit. "Is there something on my face?" The brown-haired maid explained, "Perhaps this girl was overwhelmed by your beauty." The other maids bowed. "Please forgive us, sir." Tiran spoke kindly and gently. "There's nothing to apologize for." They replied at once, "Please don't be modest with us, sir." His gaze suddenly turned toward a sound. "What's that?" From another direction, someone with pink hair entered the room. Aisla appeared with sharp eyes and a sultry face. "Is this the guest who arrived in a beggar's guise?" She sneered mockingly. "After bathing and changing, he looks no different from a prince." Tiran took some offense at her words. "Excuse me, that beggar remark." He introduced himself. "I am Tiran." She did the same. "I am Aisla." She wanted to know his background. "What house are you from?" Tiran carefully declined. "I have reasons I cannot disclose." Aisla lightly stroked her chin. "Is that so? What a pity." A mysterious smile spread across her face. "He wants to hide his identity. Then let's prod him a little." She did exactly that, releasing a burst of mana around her body. Her face brightened with excitement as she faced Tiran. "Show me what your mana is like." He was still pondering when he was startled by the surge of mana. On this side, The protagonist also began to unleash his terrifying amount of mana. The energies of the two of them collided directly, causing those nearby to feel the pressure and step back a few paces. After several seconds, both of them withdrew their auras. Tyran exhaled softly, while Aisla couldn't help but break into a smile. Haha, oh hello there. Dear guest, would you like to marry me? She made the proposal as if it were completely natural, but Tyran's face froze when he heard it. Countless question marks appeared on his face, and his bewildered expression made the redhead burst out laughing. Why do you look like that? I was only joking a little. She continued teasing. If you're hiding like that, you should at least consider it once, because the seat beside me is still empty right now. Having said that, she and her attendant left the room, leaving Tyran behind seemingly lost in thought. Then he looked down at his trembling hand and thought to himself, at least she possesses mana on par with mine. Is this level normal? Time passed quickly. Cut to the Lord's office. He spoke in welcome. Welcome, young noble, you must have heard of me. I am Lug Baltas, Lord of Orem. Hearing this, Tyran placed his hand over his chest and replied, My name is Tyran. The Lord nodded. Tyran, I heard you wish to use the library, is that correct? I'll say this up front to prevent you following false rumors. This library doesn't contain any ancient terrifying magic or secret methods to advance mana. In response, Tyran calmly said, I don't mind, that's not what I'm looking for. Knowing this, the Lord agreed to Tyran's request at once. If you wish it, I have no reason to refuse. After all, there's no family secret of ours kept inside. It's late today, rest and we'll begin tomorrow. Does that suit you? The protagonist, feeling no rush, said, I will never forget your generosity, my lord. Time passed quickly until the next morning. Cut to the front of a towering structure. After checking Tyran, the two guards agreed to let him in. I've checked your pass. We welcome you to enter the Celestial Library. Thus the door slowly opened. Tyran looked inside and exclaimed, Amazing. Before him was a vast library, with countless books placed within. This truly was the legendary library. At that moment, a small figure approached Tyran and greeted him. Pleased to meet you for the first time, Lord Tyran. I am the assistant librarian here. I will guide you through the rules for using this place by my master's orders. The Chibai girl gave a small smile. The regulations here are actually very simple. Her childlike appearance surprised Tyran. A child like this serving as librarian. Unaware of his thoughts, the girl continued. First, you must compensate for any damaged books. Second, books may never be taken out of this place. Also, I'll be watching over you the entire time you're here. She said this as she pointed directly at Tyran. He hurriedly nodded in agreement. All right, but when I'm reading, could you stand a little farther back? I feel a bit pressured. Then, while walking toward a bookshelf, the protagonist seized the chance to ask, Since you're the librarian, you must have read the books here, right? The black-haired girl nodded. Yes. Assisting you in finding the materials you need is also my duty. What kind of books are you looking for? Romance or history? Or since Lord Tyran is still young, do you want adult books? The busty girl's suggestions left Tyran silent for a few seconds. I just want to learn more about general knowledge of this world. Upon hearing that, her face showed a hint of curiosity. However, very quickly she brought a pile of books before the protagonist and explained. Most of the books here date back several hundred years, so I'm afraid they're not suitable for what you need, Lord Tyran. Perhaps these over here will help you a bit. Thank you very much, Tyran replied. The girl said, You're welcome. Then he casually picked up a book and pondered. So this is what people call a book. He quickly flipped through a few pages and checked a bit. Ah, how extraordinary. Tyran began the habit of reading at the library every day. He now had a clear understanding of the geography of this world. as well as the various tribes. Examples of mages and method for crafting diverse kinds of items, along with relics from the era of the Old Empire. The more valuable knowledge he accumulated, the clearer the once murky world became to him. Not long after, Lord Lug summoned him to his chamber. "I've heard you've been making good use of the library, is that right?" Turan answered, "Yes, that's right." Hearing that, the man continued, "Besides receiving you as a noble guest, I trust you understand that allowing you into the library was a special favor. And now it's time for me to receive some repayment for that." Regarding this, Turan naturally understood clearly and said directly, "Please state your request." The Lord then raised the issue. Recently, a magic beast has appeared to the north of Orem. It has continuously attacked people passing through that area. 4 knights went to slay it, but none returned. They were devoured. Perhaps it's time for a noble to intervene. However, my family can only dispatch 2 people. If you join to make a party of 3, it will be much safer. Turan immediately agreed to the request, but he had some doubts. Protecting the populace is normally a responsibility a mage should undertake. Yet this seemed odd. Don't mages rarely take part in such affairs? Unaware of his thoughts, Lord Lug continued, "The northern road is Orem's major trade route. It's been blocked for 10 days and must be reopened as soon as possible." Only then did Turan realize the whole situation. 10 days ago. That was before he even set foot in Orem. No wonder the Lord was so willing to let him use the library. Time passed quickly until the next day. A raiding party had been assembled and prepared to depart. Among the group, Aisla stretched and said boredly, "They really think highly of themselves. They even dragged guests along to hunt magic beasts. Is it because we don't look trustworthy?" She quickly added, fearing Turan might misunderstand, "Ah, I didn't mean you. I meant my father is exaggerating everything." Beside her, Marvin could only give an awkward chuckle. "Why call Dad an exaggerator? That's a bit harsh, sis." Aisla grumbled, "Shut up." Her nonchalance made her younger brother clench his fists in frustration. Before he turned to introduce himself, "This is your first time doing something like this, right? I'm Marvin Baltas, pleased to work with you." Turan replied, "Same here." Then the whole group set off at a brisk pace. As they walked, the red-haired woman kept complaining, "This is so boring. I just want to finish this quickly so I can go rest." Her leisurely attitude left the group at a loss for words. Suddenly Marvin asked, "Turan, do you have feelings for my sister?" Turan hastily answered, "Huh, absolutely not." "That's good," Marvin said with a smile. At that moment, growls suddenly rose up ahead. They saw wagons that had been utterly smashed to pieces. A soldier in the group approached to inspect and guessed, "Could it be that monster?" The man beside him replied, "Probably. We had banned travel to the north, so the victims were likely attacked while coming from the north down this way." From Turan's perspective, he buried himself in thought as if realizing something. His gaze rested on a hand-shaped imprint pressed into a plank of wood. From that, Turan deduced the attacker was a primate. Aisla gaped, puzzled. With no other choice, the protagonist explained to her, "Look at the handprint here. It seems it attacked the caravan and then escaped into the deep forest. I think we just need to follow the tracks to track it down." Aisla glanced at her brother. "Track it? I don't know much about those tracking magics. What about you, Marvin?" Marvin just shook his head with an awkward smile. "I'm not good at this either. Do any of the knights know?" Before they could answer, Turan cut in, "Let me try to track it." The red-haired girl seemed surprised. "Oh, are you of a lineage that can do that?" "I've just used it a lot, so I'm familiar with it," Turan replied. He then sniffed the cloth in his hand and activated his tracking skill. In the blink of an eye, a scent appeared in Turan's senses. He pointed in a direction, "Go this way." Following his lead, they soon reached a stream. The trail was broken here. It must have used something. The group was stunned, and Aisla was even more surprised. A beast that can do that to avoid being tracked. Turan explained that it acted purely on instinct. At that moment, the familiar scent suddenly appeared again. He hurriedly turned to warn everyone. Sure enough, a giant, ferocious gorilla appeared behind them. It held a handful of dirt and stones, ready to hurl them at the group. A bearded man in the group shouted, "Oh no, watch out!" No sooner had he spoken than the gorilla swung its arm with full force, flinging stones like bullets toward them, catching the group off guard. Only the protagonist was quick enough to leap to the side and dodge. But then he froze for a few seconds, because Aisla and Marvin had directly used several soldiers as shield to block the attack. After that, Aisla even tossed that man aside like a sack of rags. Seeing this firsthand, Turan realized what his mother said was not wrong at all. Unaware of his thoughts, Aisla now shouted loudly, "Everyone be careful." Up ahead, the group of soldiers seemed unconcerned about the wounded and charged together to attack the ape. The apes were very smart. Knowing they couldn't win against many people, they immediately turned and fled. Aisla, seeing this, let out a yell, "Chase it, hurry up." Before her words had finished, a stone suddenly flew past her. Its speed was fast enough to break the sound barrier. At that speed, it was like a cannonball shot straight forward, piercing through the beast's body and making it give a terrible, wailing cry. The others were stunned and turned to look behind them. Sure enough, the one who had acted was none other than Turan. In his hand was a device used for throwing stones. The gorilla collapsed, roaring in pain with each convulsion. Aisla immediately unleashed the finishing blow, "Die." A fire serpent quickly wrapped around her arm. It lunged at the gorilla before them, drowning everything in fierce flames. The area exploded. A towering column of fire shot up toward the sky, radiating an intense heat. From afar, Turan watched quietly and realized it was a bloodline power, the fire guardian of the Baltas family. As the dust slowly settled, the knights breathed sighs of relief. Aisla straightened up, a half-proud, half-excited smile spreading across her lips. When that giant rock came crashing in, my heart nearly jumped out of my chest. Marvin immediately curled a smirk, his eyes glittering teasingly. "Oh, scared enough to get goosebumps, m'lady." Aisla spun around and pointed at her younger brother. "Shut your mouth, you're the one screeching like a girl." Marvin stammered in protest. "I was just startled." While everyone gradually recovered and bandaged wounds, Turan stood apart, silently observing the chaotic scene. Blood splattered on the ground, the groans of the injured, the lingering smell of burned magic in the air. He thought to himself, "Thankfully no one died, but this situation is really not right." Although the monster's ambush was sudden, this battle should have been avoidable without serious casualties. With mana-enhanced bodies, both Aisla and Marvin should have superior endurance and speed compared to ordinary knights. Yet at the most dangerous moment, they didn't hesitate to use weaker people as shields. That action was cold and completely at odds with the noble image he had imagined. A discomforting feeling crept into Turan's chest, but he merely shook his head when Marvin noticed his gaze and asked, "Is something wrong?" Turan replied tersely, "Nothing." Aisla suddenly brimmed with enthusiasm. "Come on, don't be gloomy. The most important thing now is to absorb mana from this monster's corpse." The three walked up to the giant body. They simultaneously reached out. Pale blue lights immediately emanated from the creature's corpse, drawing pure energy back into their bodies. Turan clearly felt warm waves of mana flood his meridians, just like the books had described. Even with several people absorbing at once, the growth effect did not diminish. Theory completely correct. Minutes later, Aisla groaned in frustration and withdrew her hand. "Damn it, I've hit my limit again. This damn growth cap." Marvin sighed and shook his head. I'm full as well. Aisla clicked her tongue and glanced at Turan with a look of both admiration and envy. Now I understand why Father insisted you come along. His spellcasting skill is truly impressive. His mana capacity matches mine, yet he hasn't even touched his growth limit. Truly a monster. On the long road back, Marvin suddenly spoke with sincere tones. Thinking back, if it weren't for you today, we would have failed miserably. From tracking the trail, noticing it had bathed to erase marks, to the decisive sling throw that unbalanced it. It was all thanks to you. Turan lightly shook his head, speaking modestly. Just luck, nothing special. If anything regrettable happened, it was that I reacted one beat too slow. I didn't expect the monster to have the ability to search for and detect enemies from afar. Marvin widened his eyes. A searching ability. Yes, Turan explained slowly. From what I've read, some monsters awaken special abilities based on prominent physical traits. This one has unusually large hands and deformed, oversized eyes. Those features surely let it hurl rocks with tremendous force and spot targets from very far away in the forest. Marvin gaped at Turan as if looking at another monster. You can analyze that fast in an instant. Turan shrugged, calm. I only skimmed it in the monster encyclopedia at the library. Marvin immediately made a face and pretended to complain. That Balta's library place. No one goes there. I once got curious and tried going in, but the books were all so obscure. I couldn't even finish half a volume before giving up. Turan smiled faintly. Next time you two should ask the librarian. She'll find you something easier to read. Aisla blinked, puzzled. The librarian. There's really someone like that in that damn library. The scene shifts to the moment Turan enters the Sky Library after returning from the hunt. A clear, cheerful voice suddenly rang out. Welcome back, Turan. He immediately stiffened. A faint smile touched his lips. I made a big mistake. In this city, no knight or commoner would dare call a noble by their bare name. They always use your grace, honored guest, or sir. More importantly, the petite girl standing before him did not look like an ordinary librarian at all. Turan asked directly, his voice colder than intended, How do you know my name? The girl blinked in surprise. Then she broke into a mischievous smile. She sat on the table and giggled. You only just noticed. Of course, from the library permit, obviously. Within this library's bounds my gaze reaches every corner. Your name is right there on that thin slip of paper. Turan was silent for a moment, then asked, So what should I call you? She shrugged, playful. I don't have a real name, call me whatever you like. Or, my love sounds cute. She winked and pressed a hand to her cheek, pretending to be shy. Turan cut in at once. Fine, then call you the kid librarian. Huh, so cold, aren't you? She pouted in mock offense. HMPH, you've been using me these past few days to fetch books. Now that you know who I am, you suddenly get polite. Turan replied immediately. I'm not using you, and don't stand so close to me like that. It makes me uncomfortable. Turan tilted his head curiously. Is the kid librarian a mage from the ancient empire? She shook her head, her smile turning mysterious. No, I'm not even human. I'm closer to a spirit. Then she explained slowly, her tone gentle as if telling a fairy tale. When a soul enters a living being, it becomes a living spirit. But when it enters something neither alive nor dead, it is simply a soul. This library is my body. The human form I take now is merely a convenient way to communicate, reflecting the preferences of whoever sees me. She winked teasingly. Your preference says a lot about you. Turan immediately cut her off. Don't talk nonsense, she giggled. I'm like an image reflected on water. You see me clearly but can never touch me. Turan stroked his chin, observing. To confirm it, Turan reached out his hand toward her. His hand passed straight through her body like through smoke. The kid looked at him with a strange expression. Don't do that, it feels weird. Tiran quickly withdrew his hand. Sorry, she grumbled with arms crossed. What I hate most is not being able to deal with intruders in the library directly. If I could, I'd have beaten them long ago for taking books out without returning them. Tiran suddenly realized something important. Even the Balta's housemaster doesn't know of your existence, right? Probably no one in this library has ever known. She nodded as if reading his thoughts, because until now no one has ever been worthy enough to perceive my existence. My creator had reached their limit. Only those whose form has reached a certain level of perfection can see me, and as far as I know, you are the only one. She tilted her head teasingly. A bit romantic, isn't it? Tiran asked immediately, what do you mean by form? It's what mages usually call bloodline. He took a deep breath and said, can you tell me about my bloodline? That's something you should ask your parents, she replied. Tiran answered softly, his voice lowering, unfortunately, I'm an orphan. She paused for a moment, then smiled. Then let me check directly, if you allow me to examine your body. Tiran froze, his mind blank for an instant. Examine my body. The librarian's demeanor made the protagonist a little uneasy. But before he could react, her small hand passed straight through his chest. He jolted and cried out, ah. She beamed, done, now we're connected. Tiran complained, don't say weird things like that, it's not like it hurts. After a few seconds of probing, she withdrew her hand and reported, most of your bloodline consists of two main components, pursuit and hunting, characteristic of House Zahar, right? Tiran nodded. She continued, but there's another bloodline mixed in. The protagonist was slightly surprised by this result. You're the result of parents carrying two different bloodlines. Tiran hurriedly asked, so what's the other bloodline? She shook her head regretfully. It's sealed. Being born with a sealed bloodline from the fusion of two lines is not unusual. When you grow stronger, the seal will break and it will reveal itself. Tiran silently nodded, though the mystery still lingered in his mind. Afterwards, he found himself thinking about his mother. She was always too refined, too learned to be an ordinary commoner. Perhaps she once came from a noble family, but the bloodline was diluted to the point it could no longer sustain mana. He shook his head, dismissing the thought, then turned to thank her. She grinned mischievously, eyes sparkling. If you're truly grateful, stay another month. Cook, tell stories, whatever. Tiran shook his head. I can't. After discovering the true identity of the library spirit, Tiran no longer read on his own. He began asking many questions about the books and requesting explanations. The librarian knew even the knowledge contained in volumes that had been stolen and lost from the library over the past 1,000 years. Being able to hear direct explanations of natural laws was truly a treasure. He discovered that many diseases originate from these microorganisms, and decomposition occurs because bacteria corrode them. Additionally, he learned about light refraction, heat generated by friction, and the laws governing injury and recovery in organisms. To test what he'd learned, Tiran placed an apple in front of him. He said, now I'll start experiments with decomposition first. Saying that, he gently touched the apple with a finger and wiped across it. Suddenly, the apple withered and shriveled, looking as if it had been discarded long ago. The librarian laughed. How do you find it? Tiran replied in admiration. Impressive. It's not something ordinary magic couldn't do, but understanding the principle lets you consume far less mana than usual. Just by changing your perspective on the world, your magical ability improves. Then he stared at the librarian and voiced his conjecture. Perhaps some powerful houses have monopolized this knowledge. If all mages knew it, they'd lose their advantage. His remark seemed to gain agreement from the busty librarian. Now I understand why people's knowledge levels have declined over time. If what you say is true, it makes sense. Time passed quickly. Every party must end. Turan had to say goodbye. I think it's time for me to leave. The librarian, rearranging a few books, turned and asked, "You have to leave?" The protagonist quietly nodded. "Yes, the master here has started giving very clear hints." Hearing this, the librarian immediately became petulant and said, "No way, take me with you." She said it as she flew straight toward Turan. Unfortunately, her body passed through him and she ended up colliding with the floor. The protagonist turned and asked, "Can you leave this place?" The girl admitted bluntly, "I can't." "Then why don't you just stay here? I'll take good care of you, haha." "I refuse," Turan said. Knowing she couldn't persuade Turan, she gave up. "I don't care. There are many relics of the gods on this continent. Sometimes take some time to visit them. Perhaps you'll find a spirit who knows more than I do." Turan turned and left the room. Before he went, he didn't forget to say, "I'll come back to visit you." The librarian didn't bother to turn around but replied, "Come if you want, don't if you don't. Whatever." Turan simply offered a small smile and affirmed, "I still have a lot of books to read." So he began gathering his belongings and leaving the Lord's mansion. As he walked, he kept reminding himself, "According to the continent map I found in the library, the Entry Desert, the Zahar family's base, is east of Orem. I'll go to the Zahar clan to search for clues about my parents.